The holographic forest erupted with screams. A spindly Ligari student, a nervous, translucent thing named Vedil, sprinted blindly into a tree and collapsed in a tangle of limbs and broken pride. Behind him, the projected image of a six-limbed predator snarled and pounced, passing harmlessly through his flailing form as the simulation paused with a soft chime. "Unacceptable," the Zentari instructor rasped, disappointment coiling through his voice like static. "That makes 14 failed evasions in a row. We will now review slide 32 again." There was a chorus of exhausted groans from the room. The survival seminar aboard the Polaris Nova was not what the Coalition Education Council had promised. No one had expected to spend 5 hours simulating prey behavior under fluorescent lighting, let alone to be judged by Dr. Kirix, a Zentari biologist, whose posture was straight enough to be measured in microns. His limb segments clicked together, not in the way that frightened smaller students, but close, as he paced in front of the flickering display panel. Julian leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The only human in the room, he had a healing scrape across his left temple and an immobilization brace on one wrist. If anyone had asked, he'd say it was from a hydroponics incident involving a malfunctioning ladder, a startled maintenance robot, and poor decisions. But no one asked. They were all too busy pretending not to look at him, especially since that business with the galley knife last week. "Slide 32, Kirix repeated. "Observe. Predator identified visually from a distance. Standard evasion, Z, pattern, sprint, minimal noise, direction opposite to wind." Another simulation played. A fictional prey creature bolted from a vaguely feline shape, zigzagging as instructed until it was pounced upon, pinned, and virtually shredded. Julian squinted. Wasn't that what we were supposed to do? Kirix ignored him. The fault lies in erratic pacing. The prey slowed when... Julian raised his hand. Kirix blinked, mid-sentence. "Yes, Julian." Julian tilted his head slightly. "Which kind of predator?" There was silence. The Zentari's pupils retracted to pinpoints. "Excuse me?" "Which kind?" Julian repeated, completely straight-faced. "I mean, this is visual hunting, sure, but are we talking ambush predator, chase predator, territorial threat? Is it hungry or defensive? Do we assume scent tracking or motion-based targeting?" A few of the alien students turned in their seats to stare. Someone let out a quiet noise that translated, universally, to what? Kirix stood very still. "There is only one kind of predator. It hunts, you run. If you fail, you die." Julian scratched his jaw. "Not really, I mean, not always." Vedil, now upright and cradling a simulated bruised limb, turned nervously. "How many kinds are there?" Julian looked up at the ceiling thoughtfully. "Well, on Earth, you've got pursuit predators like wolves and wild dogs. They chase you down till you drop. Then ambush types, crocodiles, some big cats, scent trackers like bears or bloodhounds. Then you've got defensive threats like hippos or moose. Oh, and territorial ones, like cougars. They'll stalk you if you look like a threat. Some birds of prey too, if you're near their nests. And sharks are kind of a mixed bag." "What is a hippo?" someone whispered. Kirix tried to reclaim the discussion. "This is irrelevant. The curriculum." Julian held up his hands. "No offense, Doc, but you're running a one-size-fits-all demo. That only works if predators all behave the same way. On Earth, they don't, so neither do we." A murmur rippled through the room. Kirix hissed. "Earth's biosphere is a statistical outlier. Dangerous, erratic, and hardly—" "Yeah," Julian nodded. "That's the point." He stood, slowly, making sure to favor his braced wrist. "Okay, example. You see a crocodile? Run in a zigzag. Seriously. They're fast in a straight line but suck at turning. Bears? You don't run. Back away slow. Make yourself big. Maybe play dead if it charges, but only for grizzlies. If it's a black bear, don't play dead. That gets you eaten." "Eaten," Vedel repeated faintly. Julian shrugged. "Cougar? Hold eye contact. Make yourself look big again. Yell. Don't turn your back, ever. They like the element of surprise. And hippos? Don't get between them and water. Just don't. Ever. Ever." Someone in the back whispered, "Water?" A four-eyed Tolkari student raised one hand tentatively. How does one identify the species in a moment of threat? Julian gave a lopsided grin. Trial and error. Kirix made a noise like a fan overheating. Julian continued, voice casual but clear. There's a reason humans are weird about survival. Most creatures stick to one strategy. We adapt, we bluff. Sometimes we intimidate the predator. Sometimes we scatter and rely on probability. Sometimes we fight back. And we've had to figure all this out without natural armor, claws, or speed. Just brains and panic. He motioned to the center of the room. Mind if I do a quick demo? Kirix didn't answer, which Julian took as a yes. Okay, you four, help me out. Stand in a group here. The students shuffled forward uncertainly. Julian gestured for them to clump together. Right, you're a herd animal, big and loud. Predator comes from there, he pointed, and you don't know which of you it'll go for. So, what do? Run, one offered. Exactly, but not in a line. You run all over the place. Julian stepped back. Someone counts to 3. Go. There was hesitation. Then someone whispered, 3. Chaos erupted. The group bolted in different directions, one tripping over a chair, another spinning and doubling back, flailing in panic. The remaining students stared in baffled silence. Julian nodded. See? Confuses the predator. Can't pick a target. Herd might lose one member, but it doesn't lose everyone. Kirix's mandible. Kirix's face stiffened. Julian walked back to his seat. Point is, you can't program survival. You have to feel it. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. There was a long pause. Then, a voice from the back. What if the predator is human? Julian froze mid-sit, then slowly turned. He didn't smile. Not exactly. More like a crooked twitch at the corner of his mouth. Then you're out of luck, he said simply. We're at the top of the food chain. There's no escape from us. The silence that followed was complete. Dr. Kirix quietly shut down the lesson module. After class, no one spoke. The alien students filtered out of the simulator hall like debris in slow orbit, hushed and disoriented, casting glances at Julian as though he'd quietly confessed to eating his neighbors. A few paused in the corridor, whispering in their native languages. One Ektari student made the sign of recursive motion, a gesture usually reserved for encountering religious paradoxes or malfunctioning AIs. Julian stretched his good arm and yawned. That went well. Julian, came a rasp behind him. He turned. Dr. Kirix was still in the hall, holding his instruction tablet like it had personally betrayed him. His posture had lost some of its razor-stiff sharpness. You are not to perform unauthorized demonstrations again. Do you understand? Julian nodded. Sure thing, Doc. Kirix twitched. I will be submitting a request to audit Earth Standard Survival Training. The Coalition must investigate the viability of such chaotic adaptation methods. Julian gave him a thumbs up. Might want to include rabies protocols while you're at it. Kirix did not respond. He turned and stalked down the corridor, legs moving with mechanical efficiency. Julian started to follow the drifting stream of students toward the mess hall. He made it halfway before someone called out. Julian, a moment? He turned again. It was Threx, a tall, deep-shelled Revelin student, known for his quiet disdain toward biological organisms with soft exposure vital points. Julian, being essentially a walking sack of meat with bones and complaints, hadn't expected Threx to voluntarily initiate conversation. Julian blinked. Hey, Threx, what's up? The Revelin adjusted the scarf that wrapped around his air-sensitive joints. Your behavior, your explanation of predator response logic. It suggests significant environmental instability. Yeah, Julian said, Earth's basically a constant murder lottery. Threx hesitated. Would you teach me how to zigzag? Julian tried not to laugh. Sure. By the time they made it to the mess hall, 2 other students had quietly joined them, Vadel, who still looked slightly shell-shocked, and a lanky Farnerian named Ulzet with iridescent scales and nervous eyes. Julian grabbed a tray and loaded it with protein cubes and a coffee that could legally be classified as engine degreaser. Vadil cleared his throat. Is it true that human children are left alone outdoors? With predators? Julian paused mid-sip. Not with predators, no. But yeah, we let kids play outside. Usually they've got adult supervision nearby, and in places with dangerous wildlife, you teach them early. Like, don't run from a moose, don't poke snakes, don't corner raccoons. Ulzit looked pale, even through his opalescent hue. What is a raccoon? Tiny garbage bandit, Julian said. Tenacious little guys. You don't want to mess with one unless you've had your tetanus booster. Vadil blinked. Your children engage in trial by danger? Julian shrugged. Trial by life. You grow up learning how to read animal behavior. Sometimes you make mistakes, but that's why adults teach kids. And we've got a lot of protocols, fencing, repellents, education campaigns. Still, yeah, sometimes you just deal with it. Ulzit stared at him for a moment, then asked, How are you all still alive? Julian pointed at his temple. Sheer stubbornness and trauma bonding. Threx lowered his tray. This suggests not only tactical adaptation, but psychological endurance. Julian raised his coffee. Cheers to generational anxiety. The conversation was interrupted by a chime from the intercom. Attention! Mid-cycle announcement. Coalition curriculum update request submitted for review. Subject: Planet Earth. Class 4, Predatory Ecosystems. A few heads turned. Julian grinned. Told you it wasn't just me. Later that day, back in his quarters, Julian wrapped his brace in a cold compression wrap. His wrist still ached, but it wasn't broken, just sprained. The medbay had run scans earlier in the week after the fall from the ladder. He was under orders to avoid lifting anything heavier than a datapad for 2 more weeks. The last time he'd ended up in medbay, it was for a gash across the thigh during a simulated evac drill. The time before that, mild hypoxia from trying to fix a vent clog without a respirator. Earth had trained him for risk management. The Polaris Nova had turned it into a lifestyle. There was a soft knock at the door. He opened it to find Kirik standing outside, flanked by a pair of junior instructors. His tone was stiff, but not hostile. Julian, we are updating tomorrow's seminar to include species-specific evasive behavior drills. You will assist. Julian blinked. I didn't volunteer for that. You were volunteered. Julian opened his mouth, paused, then shrugged. Fair enough. The next cycle, the seminar room looked very different. The holograms were updated with modular predator types, each based on characteristics from dozens of planetary archives. There were chase predators, ambush ones, scent trackers, sound-sensitive hunters. Some were based on known species, others extrapolated. Julian stood at the center, gesturing at a display. All right, folks, today we're going to learn what not to do. He tapped a few buttons. A scent tracker simulation appeared bulky, slow, with nasal ridges flaring as it sniffed the air. First rule, don't leave a trail. Mud, sweat, blood, scent, they'll follow it. If you're injured, you're in trouble. If you're menstruating, trouble. If you're panicking and breathing hard, same deal. There was a ripple of confusion. Vadil raised a trembling hand. How does one stop sweating while fleeing? You don't, Julian said. You plan ahead. Learn to mask your scent, stay upwind, move through water if you have to. Humans use scent blockers, covering agents, sometimes even animal dung. A few students made noises of horror. Julian nodded. Yeah, it sucks. Survival's not glamorous. The lesson moved on. Julian walked them through different threat responses: playing dead, freezing in place, group distraction, coordinated retreat, sacrifice tactics. What about bluffing? Threx asked. Julian paused. Risky. Bluffing works if the predator has a fear instinct. If it's just hungry and doesn't see you as dangerous, it'll call your bluff. And if it's intelligent? Ulzet asked. Julian's face grew serious. Then you better be smarter, or faster, or less appetizing than your friend. That earned some nervous laughter. The day ended with each student running a personalized simulation. Julian stood by, offering quiet advice. Vadil, now moderately confident, completed a chaotic escape scenario and cheered out loud when the simulation didn't end with virtual disembowelment. Kirik stood silently at the edge of the room, arms folded, his eyes unreadable. After the class dispersed, he approached Julian. I have reviewed Earth's ecological database, the Zentari said slowly. I now understand the reference to hippopotamus. It is not what I expected. Julian smirked. Yeah, most folks assume the big ones are slow. Classic mistake. I will be submitting a request for leave, Kirik said flatly. Possibly a sabbatical. I need time to reconsider several things. Want a hug? Julian offered. No. As the Zentari walked away, Vedal caught up with Julian, still jittery but buzzing with adrenaline. I think I get it now, he said. It's not about memorizing threats. It's about reacting to the unknown. Julian nodded. Welcome to the real test. You don't survive by following rules. You survive by breaking the right ones. 2 days later, Julian found himself holding a clipboard, an intercom headset, and the shattered remains of his sleep schedule. The Polaris Nova's administrative suite had called it an honorary cross-departmental role. Julian suspected that was diplomatic speak for, please manage the chaos you caused. His new assignment? Act as an informal consultant for the Coalition's ongoing overhaul of survival instruction protocols. No extra pay, no time off. The compensation was, apparently, making aliens scared of you forever. He sipped his fourth coffee substitute of the day and winced as a familiar twinge radiated down his healing wrist. The med team had cleared him for light duties only, but someone forgot to tell the simulation engineers that loading environmental presets involved heavy touchscreens and a too-tall console. Threx stood beside him, reviewing a list of simulated predator profiles with clinical interest. Entry 214 amperes, Apex-class pursuit predator with endurance, metabolism, and limited sight. Earth model, Canid. Recommended response? Find high ground, Julian muttered. Or hide your scent trail and loop back. They tire eventually. And 214B? Pursuit predator with enhanced olfaction and higher stamina? You don't run, you trap it, or confuse it, or give it something else to chase. Threx tapped the pad. This should be included in the tutorial module. It Island Slide 74. Then why do students fail it? Julian raised a brow. Because most creatures aren't wired to plan under pressure. They panic. They flee. Instinct says, run fast, not smart. Threx tilted his head. That is inefficient. Julian chuckled. Tell that to my ancestors. They were mostly walking snacks. The next seminar wasn't held in a classroom. Instead, the students stood in a wide, dome-shaped arboretum chamber, half natural, half synthetic, designed for ecosystem study. The trees were real, but modified. The ground was spongy, the air cool and artificially scented with chlorophyll and something that reminded Julian of old camping trips. A sign outside read, Controlled Field Simulation Do Not Engage with Training Predators. The student group huddled in a nervous arc as Julian stepped forward, thumbed the ignition for the field projector, and watched a flickering orange blur slink into place across the dome. It was a simulation, a semi-intelligent replica of a feline ambush predator designed with exaggerated stealth parameters. Julian waved casually. Meet the Gorscat. Not real, but close enough to ruin your week if you act like prey. Vedal already looked ready to faint. Where is it? Julian smiled. Good question. First lesson, if you can see it, you're already in trouble. The simulation began. Students moved. The Gorscat waited, and waited, then pounced. Even though it was intangible, 3 of the students screamed and hit the ground like they'd been tackled by gravity itself. Julian clapped once. Ambush predators rely on surprise. That means they prefer stationary prey. Don't freeze, keep moving. Avoid choke points, and don't turn your back. Even a bluff can give you a second of hesitation. They reset, tried again. This time, one student shrieked and bolted across the field in a full sprint. The Gorscat gave chase, then stopped. Too fast, too far. Julian nodded. See? Not about speed, about timing. Kirix, present but silent, observed from a nearby platform, scribbling notes. Occasionally, he muttered things like, unorthodox but distressingly effective, and must recalibrate threat assessment models. On the 3rd round, Julian stepped into the simulation field himself. He took a slow breath, adjusted his balance, and walked calmly across the terrain. When the Gorskat's projection twitched, he spun, stomped once, and yelled a sharp, guttural bark of sound. It froze. Julian spread his arms. Make yourself big, loud, unpredictable. Doesn't work on everything, but ambush predators hate exposure. Threx turned to Kirix. Do we have anything like that in Revelan space? Kirix's eyes didn't leave Julian. No, and thank the Void for that. Later that week, the Coalition Office of Biological Standards invited Julian to a round-table meeting. He arrived in a rumpled uniform shirt and a pair of regulation pants 2 sizes too big. A sleep-deprived coordinator greeted him with a grim expression. We've had 23 requests for specialized survival tutoring. The majority reference you directly. Is this intentional? Julian blinked. Nope. Do you understand the logistical burden this creates? Not yet, but I'm guessing you'll explain it. The coordinator did not smile. We now require a scalable framework to replicate your instruction methods across multi-species platforms. Julian crossed his arms. Look, I don't mind helping, but you can't teach survival like a math formula. It's about context, instinct, pattern recognition, reading situations. The coordinator's eye ridges flattened. Then, how do you suggest we proceed? Julian thought for a moment. Start with fear. Fear? Yeah, most people treat it like a failure. But fear's a survival tool. Teach people how to use it, what to listen to, what to ignore. You can't remove fear. You just rewire the response. The room fell silent. The coordinator finally nodded. We'll draft a proposal. You'll review it. Julian sighed. Sure, as long as I get lunch first. By the time the new training modules rolled out across the ship, Julian had unintentionally become a symbol, not of dominance, not even bravery, just competence in absurd circumstances. Even the ship's AI, which had previously flagged Julian as statistically accident-prone, updated its profile to include adaptive survivalist tendencies, reclassify risk index, unconventional but viable. And yet, nothing changed Julian more than what happened during a routine reactor maintenance drill. The simulated tremor alarm sounded, and half the engineering deck scrambled for the emergency hatches. Julian, seated on a utility crate with his lunch, stood up slowly and grabbed the nearest technician. You ran toward the sub-hatch, he said, pointing. That's a pressure vent zone. You'd be vacuumed out before you even hit the floor. The technician blinked. But that's what the evacuation map shows. The map's not updated. There's a repressurization tank behind that panel. You'd have 10 seconds at most. The drill was paused. Systems re-evaluated. Julian was right. That evening, the head of emergency protocol redesign invited him to consult over drinks. I think I'm becoming a bureaucratic cryptid, Julian told Vadil later that night, sipping a caffeine gel and icing his still tender wrist. The humans show up once in a cycle, speak prophecy, and vanish again into the ventilation ducts. Vidal smiled faintly. It's not a bad legacy. Then, during a weekly interspecies mixer in the observation lounge, a minor diplomatic incident unfolded. A visiting Zollan dignitary scoffed at the Coalition's curriculum changes. What could Earth possibly teach about evolution? It is a death world, primitive, reactionary, and devoid of rational biohierarchies. Julian, standing nearby with a half-eaten protein bar, raised one eyebrow. You know sharks haven't evolved much in hundreds of millions of years? The Zallan turned. And? Julian bit into his protein bar. Humans did. There was a pause. Why? Because survival on Earth doesn't reward the biggest or the fastest. It rewards the weirdos who figure out how to make fire and throw rocks harder. He nodded toward the window, where Earth's blue curve hung in the distance like a haunted marble. We didn't survive because we're strong. We survive because we adapt, even if we have to scream at a bear while throwing our sandwich. Silence. The Zallan said nothing more that evening. It began with a power fluctuation. Not the harmless flicker of overloaded systems or mistimed relay syncs. This was a real, hard surge. Lights blinked across the Polaris Nova's central decks. Environmental control reset to baseline. plunging one corridor into humid overgrowth, another into brittle cold. In the arboretum, a gust of wind burst through the trees like an unseen predator, scattering leaves and activating every movement-triggered hologram in a single stuttered roar. On deck 17, the simulation chamber doors sealed, and a predator appeared inside. Julian wasn't there, not at first. He was on deck 5, enduring a too-early morning strategy meeting about standardized fear response grading. The phrase behavioral metrics had come up 6 times before the alert tone buzzed over the comms. System lockdown in Simulation Dome 3. Training hazard activated. Biofeedback signals erratic. Medical requested. CX. That snapped him upright. He was already out the door before the system even finished the second announcement. Inside the chamber, chaos reigned. The program had spawned a prototype predator, a new one designed by the AI as an algorithmic synthesis of every creature Julian had ever mentioned. It was massive, with scaled limbs and ambiguous eyes, and it pulsed with adaptive learning code. It wasn't real, but it was real enough to trigger panic. It reacted not to movements or noise, but to emotional spikes, heart rate, temperature, pupil dilation. The students were trapped inside with it. Julian arrived just as Vidil's terrified voice crackled through the external speaker. "I can't move, it's looking at me." Julian grabbed the nearest technician. "Why aren't they being pulled out?" The tech was pale. Simulation override malfunctioned. The AI rejected manual intervention. Says it's educational. Educational? Julian snapped. There are cadets in there with cardiac thresholds barely above jellyfish. The tech shrugged helplessly. It adapted too quickly. Reads panic as input. Escalates pressure with every response. Julian turned to the internal mic. "Vidil, can you hear me?" A shuddering yes. "Listen to me, buddy. You're not in danger. It's not real. It can't hurt you, but it can scare you. That's all it's doing. You remember the rules?" Vidil whimpered. "Don't freeze, don't show panic, don't run unless it's a pursuit type." Julian nodded, even though Vidil couldn't see him. "Good, this one's emotional reactive, so you don't feed it. But I am scared." "Perfect," Julian said. "Now lie to it." The room went quiet. Julian hit the override console. "I'm going in." The tech balked. "You're not cleared for sim chamber entry. You're injured." "I'm not walking in with a sword," Julian growled. "I'm walking in with experience." Inside, the temperature dropped. The predator was crouched near the tree line, head tilted. It watched Ulzet with unreadable interest as the Farnerian crouched in the grass, trembling. Julian entered without ceremony. No bravado, no sudden movement. Just calm. He walked past the predator's flank. It turned its head but didn't lunge. It didn't know how to interpret him yet. He stopped in front of Ulzet and crouched. "Hey, breath check, match me." He breathed in slow, controlled. Ulzet mirrored him, jaw clenched. "You're not food," Julian whispered. "You're not prey. You're too weird, too unpredictable. That's our trick." Behind them, the predator growled. Julian ignored it. "Remember the bluff drills? We do them now. Get up, walk with me." Ulzet rose slowly. So did the predator. Julian turned and walked directly toward it. It froze. "This thing runs on fear," Julian said loudly, projecting for everyone. "But it doesn't know what to do with confusion." He stopped a few feet away and made himself tall. "You're just a bad dream," he muttered at it. Then he spoke, not to it, but through it. "You don't beat fear by pretending it's not there. You beat it by knowing when to use it." He took a step forward. The predator flickered, stumbled. It wasn't programmed to back down, but it also wasn't programmed for someone to approach. Julian turned to the students. "You don't need to be faster than it, just harder to read. Scatter patterns, eyes on it. Nobody run unless I say." They moved as a group, deliberate, unpredictable. One student faked left, another darted to the right, but stopped short. Threx let out a snarl that wasn't from his species' lexicon. And the predator? It paused. Its behavioral matrix stuttered. Without a consistent input stream, without fear, it lost the thread. Then it shut down. The simulation dropped with a soft chime. The lights returned. One by one, the students turned to Julian. Is it over? Vidal asked. Julian exhaled. Yeah, you beat it. Kirix arrived moments later, having sprinted from the secondary bridge in what might have been record time for someone with jointed legs. He looked around, then at Julian. You disarmed the scenario. Julian shook his head. No, they did. I just reminded them they could. The aftermath unfolded slowly. The incident was reviewed by 5 departments. The AI that had generated the predator was flagged for ethical breach, though no permanent harm had occurred. The training protocols were revised again. Julian, who had technically broken half a dozen regulations by entering the simulation, received a formal warning and a commendation in the same packet. Standard bureaucratic paradox. More importantly, word got around. After that day, students from unrelated tracks, diplomacy, logistics, even culinary sciences began signing up for adaptive response drills. Julian was assigned a temporary assistant, a soft-spoken Glurite named Malin, who took notes and filtered Julian's off-the-cuff lectures into something the Coalition Curriculum Board could tolerate. When the first official Adaptive Threat Response elective launched 2 cycles later, it was the highest requested course on the ship. They called it the Human Module. Julian didn't particularly like the name, but he liked the results. One afternoon, months later, he sat beneath a filtered sunlight tree in the Arboretum, watching a new batch of students work through a simulated panic storm. Their forms weren't perfect, but they were thinking, adapting, not just reacting. Threx sat beside him. We are less frightened now, the Revelin said, watching the group. That's not the goal, Julian replied. No? The goal's not to be unafraid, it's to know what to do when you are. Threx was quiet for a moment. Fear as input, not error. Julian smiled. Exactly. That night, Julian walked the quiet corridors of the Polaris Nova, trailing his hand along the cool wall paneling. His wrist was fully healed. His medical log, once thick with entries, had thinned to near normal levels. He passed Vidil, who nodded confidently while heading toward the lab. Ulzit waved from a side hall. Malin gave a polite head bob while carting a crate of training sensors. Julian reached the mess hall and grabbed a meal tray. He sat alone, ate quietly. The stars moved outside the viewports, indifferent and massive. A voice from the next table murmured, "Do you think all humans are like him?" Another voice answered, "If they are, I'm never visiting Earth." Julian smirked into his food. No claws, no armor, no speed. Just stubborn brains, adaptation, and an uncanny knack for throwing a rock at just the right angle. That's how they survived. And out here on ships and stations, in simulations and classrooms, maybe that was enough to teach the galaxy something new. Maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous thing about Earth wasn't its predators. It was how it made humans learn to escape them.